I'm Jen from That Mama Book Nook, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about my July TBR. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I love talking about the books that I'm going to be reading each month. As a TBR reader, it is always exciting for me to share what is coming up next on my list. I plan to share, each of the books that I'm going to read, as well as why they are on my list for July. As I've explained in previous videos, because I'm a TBR reader, I do have a lot of rollover from previous months because I often don't get to finish, but this is just new books that I'm going to be talking about for July, even if I don't end up reading them to the August, maybe even September, but definitely hoping to get to some of these at the very least. The first book that I'm going to be talking about is Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books by Kirsten Miller. I am reading this book with the Reading Through book club. I will link all the book clubs, if they're public, down below. This is a story about two women. We have Beverly Underwood and Luna Dean, who live in a small town in the state of Georgia. Beverly is on the school committee. Lula Dean is a woman in town. Both of these women have grown up here. They've known each other since childhood, but they have opposing views. Lula would like to see inappropriate books banned from public spaces, and Beverly is against that. Lula tries to make this happen by starting her own little free lending library outside her home, and she fills it only with books that are approved by her. Beverly's daughter is not okay with this either, so she sneakily goes out one evening and switches all the dust jackets of the books. So she puts the approved books dust jackets on the outside of banned books. So when people go to these libraries, they think that they are getting this book, but actually they are getting a chance to read a banned book. While this is going on, Beverly and Lula are both running against each other for mayor. Things are getting heated, and Beverly's daughter finally decides to come clean about what she did, but also the people who have been reading the books decide to come forward and share how these books have changed them. I'm looking forward to reading this book. I did read a book last month, I forget if I read it in May or June, called This Book Won't Burn, that also deals with book banning, and it was a 5-star read for me. The one I read previously was a YA, so this feels like the adult version of that. So I'm excited to see how they are different, how they compare, but overall just a really great message, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with the book club. The next book that I am hoping to read in July is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. I am reading this with the Introverted Bookish Besties book club. This book follows Annie, who lives in the small town of Rome, Kentucky. Because it is a small town, she is having a hard time with dating. The pool of guys is just getting smaller and smaller, and she's not super interested. In fact, the last guy that she dated, Annie overheard him saying that she was so unbelievably boring. So now Annie is kind of like, is it me? I'm fun, I can be fun, I can be spontaneous. So she feels like maybe she just needs a little bit of practice. Her old friend is coming back to town as a bodyguard for a upcoming wedding. He's the bodyguard to the bride. The groom is actually Annie's brother. The bodyguard's name is Will, and Annie asks Will if he will tutor her in dating. He doesn't want anything to do with it, but he reluctantly agrees because he just can't say no to her. But the mentor friendship lines definitely start to blur. I have had this one on my TBR for a long time, so I'm really looking forward to getting to this. The next book I am reading with a book club is Triple Duty Bodyguards by Lily Gold. This I am reading with the Sweeney Readers. This follows Briar, who is a celebrity. She says that she is the most hated celebrity in the world. Usually that doesn't bother her, but when she wakes up one morning to find her house has been broken into and that she has a stalker, she decides that it is time to get some security. So she hires 3 bodyguards. At first she finds them really smothering, she finds them over dramatic, they find her to be a diva and very demanding, but the stalker is escalating his behavior, so they are all staying really close by and sparks begin to fly with all 3 of them. This is a reverse harem romance. It will be my first kind of why choose, so we'll see how that goes. The next book I am reading with the Thrills and Chills book club. The book is Gray After Dark by Noelle W. Ely. Miley was training for the Olympics, but she has a bad accident and she can no longer do that at this time, so she takes a summer position on a mountain resort, and she decides this will be the perfect place where she can relax, recover, and start training again. She goes out for a morning run one day and she gets abducted. She finds herself in a cabin. She now has to figure out how to survive and escape. Apparently this book is based on true events, so I'm really interested to see how it goes. The next book is Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I am reading this with the Literally Dead book club. I talked a little bit about this one in my June new release video. This is Riley Sager's new book. It is following Ethan. When he was young, he and his good friend Billy camped out in a tent in the backyard. And when Ethan woke up, the tent had been slashed, Billy had been taken, and he has never been seen from again. Flash forward 30 years later, and Ethan comes back to his hometown, but he definitely is struggling mentally. He is suffering from nightmares, he has insomnia, and he starts to see some strange happenings in the middle of the night. Putting all this together, he decides that it's finally time to figure out what happened to Billy. This month, I am going to be reading my very first Ali Hazelwood book, which I am so excited about. I have pretty much put her entire backlog on my TBR, so I'm excited that some are finally coming up. I'm actually going to be reading 2 this month. One of them is Bride. This is Ali Hazelwood's supernatural romance book. This follows Misery Lark, who is a vampire who has been living among the humans when she is called to uphold an alliance with the werewolves. She is being forced to marry one of them. Lo Moreland is that werewolf, or the wares as they're called in this book. He is very protective of the wares. He doesn't quite trust this vampire. He thinks that she might have an ulterior motive. I'm really interested to see what I think about this, see how I feel about Ali Hazelwood's writing, but I think it will be a really fun read. I forgot to mention that I am reading Bride with the Stay-at-Home Mom Book Queen book club. The next Ali Hazelwood book that I am going to be reading is her new one, Not in Love. This also came out in June, so I also talked about this a little bit in my June new releases. I'm going to be reading this with just buddy reading with some bookish besties. Really always a good time discussing books with them. This book follows Rue, who works for a startup biotech engineering company that focuses on food science. The company's name is Klein. Then Eli and his business partner kind of come in. They want to buy out Klein. They're at heads about, from a business standpoint, of who is going to get this company. Is Klein going to remain standing, or is Eli going to be able to buy it out? Rue and Eli, however, can not keep their eyes off of each other, so they decide to start an affair, but they somewhat realize that this affair is doomed from the start, since when one of them wins out, the other one is not going to feel great about it. The next book that I always add to my TBR is my next best rated book. So I go into Goodreads, I sort my books by average rating, and I pick the next one that is on my list. So this month I will be reading The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. This is a case where technically it was the third book in the series that is my next best rated book. I just substitute the next book that I'm on in the series. So in this case, I'm starting the series. So I'm putting in the first book. When the next book comes up, whether it's the first book or the second book, then I will put the second book in there and so on. So that's how that goes. But yeah, I will be reading The Ever King. This is about King Eric, the king of the Ever Kingdom. He desperately wants revenge on the man who killed his father and has trapped Eric prisoner here for a long time. When this enemy's daughter accidentally breaks the chain that's holding Eric to the Ever Kingdom, he decides to use the daughter as a pawn in his revenge. But the romance that starts to develop between the two might get in the way. This book is listed as pirates, sirens, fae, Vikings, dark romance, so a little bit of everything it feels like. And I'm excited to get into this one. It also mentioned that it is in the same world as the Broken Kingdom series. So if I end up liking the series, I will also add that one. It seemed like it was just the same world. It wasn't that important that I read that series first, luckily. So I'll try this one out and then go from there. Then I also always read a book from the Goodreads Best Books Ever list. The next one that is coming up is Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. This is a challenge that I inflicted upon myself, but I just, kind of what it says, I go to the Goodreads Best Books Ever list and I am just reading through it one book at a time through the month. If it's a book I've already read, I can obviously skip it. Same rules apply for my ratings. If it is not the right number in the series, I will just read the next book that I'm on in its place until I eventually get to the further ones. But anyway, this is the one that's up for July. Angels and Demons follows Robert Langford. He is called to investigate a murder of a world-renowned scientist because there is a mysterious symbol that has been marked on the victim's chest. When Robert Langford investigates, he discovers that it is the mark of the Illuminati, which is a secret brotherhood that was thought to be extinct for the past 400 years. But apparently it is alive. The Brotherhood goes after the Catholic Church. So then the story takes us to Rome, where Robert teams up with Vittoria, who is a scientist in Italy, to save the Vatican. Not sure, to be honest, how I'm going to feel about this one, but that's kind of what I like about this challenge, is that it gets me to read books a little outside my usual genre, a little outside my comfort zone, so it always ends up being interesting whether or not I end up loving the book. Then I always like to read a book from my physical shelf, so I have my physical TBR sorted by page number. So I am reading books from the longest in my shelf to the shortest. So the next longest book on my shelf is The Likeness by Tana French. This is 466 pages, so you can kind of tell where I am in my books. This year has been my long reads, mid 400s is where I'm at now, towards the middle of the year. This book follows Cassie, who is a detective. She gets moved to the murder squad. She starts a relationship with another detective named Sam. Sam calls her to the scene of a murder, and when she gets there, she finds that the victim is her doppelganger. And on the victim, she even finds an ID that is Cassie's undercover name that she used a few years ago. So they don't find really any other clues. They don't have any leads to solve this murder. So what are they going to do? They put Cassie undercover to see if they can draw the killer out. I have been really, really looking forward to reading a Tana French book. This will be my first one. I am really excited to get to it and see if I like her writing style, and I have a lot of other books of hers that I would love to get the opportunity to read as well. The last couple books on my July TBR, are advanced reader copies. The first one is called The Version You Hide by Eve Blakely. I talked a little bit about this one in my mid-year freakout tag video. This is the third book in the Cliff Haven series. I have read the second one. I have not read the first one, but I do plan on it. The first two can be read as standalones, but the author has said that they highly recommend that if you read the third one, you at least have read the second one. Having read the second one, which I talked about in my summer book recommendation video, I loved that book. I can see why there would be pretty major spoilers for the second book if you haven't read it and you went straight into the third book. I did love the second book, so I am super appreciative for this advanced reader copy. But anyway, briefly, The Version You Hide follows Mackenzie, who hasn't had the greatest upbringing in her life. She didn't have really good parental figures. She got kind of messed up with her criminal ex-boyfriend, but now she's living in Cliff Haven and she's doing a lot better. She wants to put all of that behind her, but she is having a hard time doing that when people keep popping up. And we have Dylan, who is a Cliff Haven resident. He runs the Seaside Tavern. He always seems so happy-go-lucky, but he also kind of leads this double life a little bit. And when he convinces Mackenzie to do one fake date for his parents' sake, she finds out there's a lot more to him than initially presents. The next advanced reader copy that I will be reading in July is called Behind Every Good Man by Sarah Goodman Confino. This comes out in August. This is probably one of my most anticipated books of the year. I also talked about this one in my mid-year freakout tag video. This is following Beverly Diamond. She catches her husband Larry with his secretary. This takes place in 1962, Washington, D.C. Beverly is a mom of 2 young children. She has no degree, no financial support. She has been a housewife. It is the 1960s. So what is she to do? Being married to Larry, who works on a senatorial campaign, she has a lot of political knowledge on how to run these campaigns. So while Larry is helping with the campaign of the individual who is, projected to win, Beverly decides to be a little bit spiteful, a little petty, and she goes and decides to help the underdog. His name is Michael Lindo. She inserts herself into his campaign and really teaches him how to be a good candidate. There also is maybe some sparks there, so we'll have to see if there's some sort of romance that develops. I am really looking forward to this one. There also is supposedly some little ties to Sarah Goodman Confino's book that came out last year, Don't Forget to Write, and that was one of my favorite books of 2023. So I think it's just little Easter egg type things, but I'm really excited to maybe get to see one of the characters again, even if just for a moment. But really looking forward to this one, and we'll definitely be sharing all about it. Then the very last book that I'm going to be reading for July is called The Cliffs by J. Courtney Sullivan. This book I am reading as part of Bookspark's Summer Reading Challenge. This book follows Jane Flanagan, who as a young teen, she finds this abandoned house. The house has not been lived in for quite some time, but whoever lived there before left all their things, so it's still filled with clothes, marbles, plenty of things, and Jane really uses it as a special hideout for herself as she is kind of coming of age. Flash forward 20 years later, Jane returns back to Maine and to this special house and finds it completely gutted and transformed. The current owner is convinced that the house is haunted and asks Jane if she will investigate that. Jane agrees, and she uncovers all this story about lovers lost at sea. There's romance, there's loss, there's historical artifacts, there's art, there's so much that she uncovers just from looking into this history and the house and its owners. I think that this book will be a really cool read, and I'm really looking forward to it and really appreciative of Booksparks for that copy. That does it. That is my July to be read plans. I mentioned in a previous video that sometimes I call it my, instead of a July hopefuls list or a July TBR list, it is my July Delulus list, but July I do think will be a pretty good reading month. I don't have a lot of big events, I should have a little bit more free time, so I am looking forward to getting lots of reading done in July. Feel free to leave in the comments what books you are reading in July. I love to see what other people are reading, and I will see you on my next video. Bye!